What's up, everybody? This is Cyrus, here again with Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics, where we talk about complex paranormal subjects, life after death, things like that. A little bit of an offbeat subject today, I suppose, but I thought of a really good analogy which may help people understand a little bit about the controversial and also highly complicated subject of why a human soul would incarnate here in this body in this world, which we now know is not the only world out there. So why would we come to this particular plane, as they call it? And well, before we dive into this subject, if you like this type of thing, if you like paratopics, supernatural topics, then I encourage you to please help the channel out by punching the subscribe button. It's the big red button down below. You can hit like, you can share the video, hit the notification bell. Easy stuff to do. It's the only way to keep the video relevant in the eyes of the YouTube algorithm. And if YouTube doesn't see that a video is being liked and shared and people are not subscribing, then they actually demote the video, fewer people see it, and this channel stays in a quagmire. So definitely need some help with that. To continue. So when I was a kid, I used to play a computer game called EverQuest. So that's the graphic you see on the screen. Back then, the graphics were like really cool when I was, I don't know, 12 years old, I guess. Now, today, of course, the graphics look ridiculous, but people still play the game just as it was back then, and I still play it sometimes, so shout out to the Project 1999 server, where the community is still going. In fact, actually the normal game as well is still quite active for a 22-year-old game. It's surprising. There's a lot of people who still play it. Anyway, so I used to play it a lot more when I was a kid, and it's a massively multiplayer game. Lots and lots of people play it, and they play trolls and elves and lizard men and all types of different races, and everybody has to basically work together to fight enemies, which are usually really difficult to kill, and then you collect loot, explore the world, all this kind of stuff, right? So that was EverQuest, very, very popular when I was a kid. And EverQuest, as well as any online computer game, these days, so that would include console games as well. Now, since everything basically is integrated with the internet, there was a time when it was exclusively just console games were purely console games, and then computer games were purely computer games. It's a grayer area now. So basically, with online gaming in general, and with a lot of games, there's this concept of different servers. So with EverQuest, here's how that worked. So they have a copy of the game, and it's as intended. So you have the normal version of the game, but then they want to have different rule sets that different people can have different types of experiences. So as an example, they created a server on EverQuest where anybody can trade any item they want. So normally, if you kill this big bad dragon and they'll drop this sword that everybody wants, you cannot trade that with other players. You have to be able to go and earn it yourself. But they made a special server where anything that drops, anybody can trade it amongst themselves. So it made a very different type of experience for people who play on that server. Then they made like a what we call PvP, so player versus player. So people who are bored with the normal game, they could go onto this server where everybody's basically killing each other. So to give you an example about that, like I would play the normal game, and then I would get a little bit bored, and I would decide, well, I'm going to do something different. So I would make a character on the PvP server. And then for like 4 or 5 days, I'd play that, and I'd be really into it because I would think, wow, this is so exciting, it's so intense. I'm playing and I'm watching my back because I think another player is going to come out of the bushes and stab me and take all my stuff. So I'm playing like this. I'm really enjoying it. 4 or 5 days pass. Finally, that does happen. Somebody kills me, takes my equipment. I lose all my work, and I'm like, that sucked. I'm getting out of this server, going back to the old one. But it was fun while it lasted. So with any kind of game, you have this concept where they have different servers that people can swap around to and then enjoy the same game, different rule set, different types of experiences, different things to do. So how does this relate to choosing the life we live here on what we call the Earth plane, the Earth server? Because it's the same concept. So something silly like this, what we find, what I believe, in in kind of the human condition, is that behaviors on a small level sometimes reflect on a much bigger level. So something as silly as that actually reflects quite possibly how we make decisions on a bigger, grander, more cosmic scale too. So let's say the astral world is a different server. Or more accurately, the astral world we could say is the normal server, and then where what we're doing right now, this world is a different server with a different rule set. Now, I find it similar a little bit to like the PvP server. So it was the PvP server back when I played EverQuest was much more difficult than the normal game, and I had some really cool experiences playing on that server, but ultimately I couldn't keep playing it because it was just too difficult, and it was too intense because another player could take like one item off your body, and in that game it took so long sometimes to get the items that you want. And that's one of the reasons the game was such an infamous time sink, because it's so difficult. You finally get the sword off the creature, and then a player comes along, kills you, takes your sword, and then you'll probably take your computer monitor, and they're pretty heavy, bulky things back then, like toss it off the balcony. So it was very challenging, but also with the high risk came high reward, which was, if you became the player to do that to somebody else, then it's a whole different story, right? But anyway, the people on the astral world, when I've astral projected, it's strangely similar to this concept, because I've heard like this world discussed a bit as almost like a weird dream or a nightmare, but like a parallel version of the world that they normally live in, where things are much more difficult, where there is much more challenge, where we are really put to the test, and people, while we're here, we don't want to be here, but then in retrospect, everyone is happy that they did it because it provided all these experiences and all this kind of character building which they wouldn't have gotten anywhere else. So using this analogy, our world is a server, a separate server from the one that everybody is normally on, where just like with a server, you have the same game. So like on the astral plane, it's the same game, it's the same environment, the same cities, the same locations, the same setup with physics in the body, and being able to have a human life, human civilization. So it's the same programming, same game, same setup, different rule set. Instead of being intense and difficult like here, on that side, you can fly around, communicate telepathically, build stuff, construct stuff kind of with your thoughts if you so desire it. You don't have to work to survive. People do work jobs they want to work. People generally are having a lot more fun. Here it's a lot more work, a lot more difficult, but with any computer game, you will find people who will willingly choose the most difficult, challenging servers because they want to test their mettle. They want to prove it to themselves, and they want to experience things you wouldn't be able to experience otherwise, even if everybody else says, hey, you're crazy for picking that server, it's so difficult. So to me, I think the psychology is the same. I think the analogy works, and it also works in this way that with a computer game, it's data, it's a piece of software, and reality is a bit like software as well. I mean, when it comes to the rules of physics and the way all this is set up, it's vastly complicated, but it's like a program, and the reason the astral plane can look and feel on the surface to be so similar is because it's kind of like it's the same program, just modified. Now, of course, there's places where the game it's a whole different game, where you're not a human, and it's very much an alien existence. We hear about beings of light and things really beyond our imaginations, I mean, yeah, eventually perhaps it's time to load a different game and install something else. But fortunately, we're in charge of that. Whenever we play the game we love as long as we want to play it, and that's always an important takeaway point as well. Finally, who is playing the game? Well, I guess that's God, isn't it? Or you could just say your higher self, your group soul, or the higher perspective of who you are. So who is it that's really doing the thinking inside your mind? Who is the observer? That's the player, and that's how it is in all contexts, whether we're in this world or the next world, or playing a computer game in this world. Well, that's it for tonight's video. This is Cyrus. If you like this kind of stuff, then I encourage you to join the group on Facebook, Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics, afterlifetopics.com. Books out there like Understanding Life After Death by me, Cyrus Kirkpatrick. You can find that on Amazon. The link is in the description down below. You can join the classes, get involved that way. And yeah, so kind of a funky analogy, maybe a new perspective to think about. I don't know. All right.